Today, we are going to be talking about the real reasons why people abuse. We're going to look behind the motivation behind, we're going to look behind the motivation not just of men, which gets a lot of focus, right or wrong. I know they get a lot of focus, but also why women abuse, why people abuse. And the reasons differ actually. The reasons why men abuse versus women abuse differ a whole lot. In fact, some people will say, and I actually disagree, that women abuse because of patriarchy, because they are in a oppressive position. But I actually don't think that's the full reason. I think some women do get into reactive abuse, but I also think there are evil women. There are women who are very abusive and very harmful, and if they were a man, they would be doing it, and it had nothing to do with the fact that they've had a rough life. So let's get into the reasons why people abuse, both men and women abuse, and let's also look at the key differences. So I'm going to start out why men abuse, then look at why women abuse, then I'm going to get into why abusers in general don't recognize the problem. We're going to talk about why victims fail to recognize abuse, because how many of you have gotten out of a relationship and have said at the time, I had no idea, I don't know how I missed it. So we're going to talk about why victims miss it and how to see patterns of abuse. And then I'm going to wrap it up by taking your questions. So I'm so excited that you're here today. Thank you so much for everybody on the various platforms. I'm right now simultaneously on TikTok, YouTube, and Facebook. For those of you who missed this on TikTok, the whole thing, you're going to always be able to jump over to Facebook and YouTube and find the recording of that. But that's why I'm looking away. I'm looking away because I'm staring straight ahead at YouTube and Facebook. So, oh, you're freezing. I know why you're freezing. Let me address this real quick. I know exactly what the issue is. Okay, so TikTok should be fixed because I just fixed the connection, so sorry about that. Every time that I go live, I always have to like set my camera up, and the way I set it up is through a remote, like you want to know, through remote control through my phone, and I forget to turn it back to the Wi-Fi, so we are now on a better connection. All right, why do men abuse? And then we're going to get, so anybody who's hearing this and being triggered, please know that we're going to talk about why women abuse. We're going to get there. Let's talk about how each sex dynamics is a little different. And it makes sense they're different because men and women are not the same. There are things that are critically different about each gender. But we want to look at why they're different and how that difference then it manifests in an abusive relationship. So men abuse because they've been raised to feel like they're entitled and that they should be protectors and they should be top dog because they tend to see things in a hierarchical position. I just finished the series, a limited Netflix series called Adolescence. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. It's 4 episodes, so it's not a long watch, but it's very disturbing, and it gives you an inside look of a growing teenage boy's mind who was very abusive in a violent, horrific way. But what's more important is it gives you a look at his relationship with his father and his father's relationship with him and what happens in that dynamic between the two of them, which ends up being so harmful ultimately to the teenage boy, which is heartbreaking. I mean, the ending of the whole series is it's just heartbreaking. By the way, if you're on whatever platform you're on, if you wouldn't mind sharing this, liking this, doing what you can to sort of get involved with it, it would be really helpful. Right now on TikTok, I have 0 likes, so it would be really great. I know the topic is, I should even say, this topic's going to be triggering. I want to warn you, this is a very difficult issue that we're talking about. So the number one reason why men abuse is because they can, and because they've been allowed, as we've seen in this movie Adolescence, to believe that they sort of are top dog and that they have control and they have authority and that it's okay to sort of dominate. And if you watched last week's episode of the podcast, Breaking Free from Narcissistic Abuse, where I interviewed Chuck Derry, who did this massive list of working with abusive men that filled up, I think it was a 4x8 blackboard of all the reasons. And all the reasons were really crappy reasons, like because they can, because it gets them what they want, because they want sex, because she gets the meals ready, because he likes her afraid of him. I mean, they're really crappy reasons. So that's the number one reason. It ties right into this, which is number 2, coercion and control, because they like the control of things. They like having control. And this was noted years ago by Deborah Tannen, Tannen's work. She's a PhD in social linguistics. Fascinating individual. She looked at the language people used in the workplace. That was her original work. In her book that came out was You Just Don't Understand. It was really an interesting look, and I think that it stands the test of time. At least I feel that it have. I mean, that's what I've seen in my work in the counseling office. But she saw that that men and women communicate differently because our view of the world is different. That women tend to see things more of a collaborative team mentality, not always, but a lot of the time, and men tend to see it hierarchical. And if you look at the setup of organizations, there tends to be a president and a vice president, and then those who work underneath of them, which reflects the hierarchical order. And because men are the ones that sort of set up the workplace, I think that's a fair representation of how they view the world. So it makes sense that sometimes abuse is just fundamentally about control. It's not about anger. It's not about emotional dysregulation. They just want control and to be dominant. The number 3 reason is social reinforcement of gender roles. Here's the thing, that if you start to really notice men's language, and by the way, those of you who are joining me, please know I'm going to get to women in a minute. I'm not picking on men today. This is just starting with men, but we're going to get to women. But if you've noticed women or men's language, the way they differentiate themselves from women is they say they're not going to be a woman. They don't want any feminine quality as a woman. So they have to say that they're different from women. And as a result, anything that looks soft or potentially feminine or weaker or it belongs to the woman category is seen as like a diminishment of themselves, like a marker of them not being masculine, which I think actually really needs to change. That's one of the things I think is deeply wrong and concerning about gender roles, is that men shouldn't have to define their identity by alienate themselves from their feminine side, because they are both innately masculine and feminine, just like women are innately masculine and feminine as well. Is that we should be able to enlist our whole self all the time, whatever we do, whether we're in our masculine energy or in our feminine energy. But for men to be seen as men, they have to say, don't be a wuss, man up. Hey, ladies, you don't want to be a girl. Quit being a fuss. You're not crying, are you? We do all these things that make it dangerous for men to show that side. So there's social reinforcement. Then it also then allows men to use anger as a form of managing relationships and managing emotions. Men also get in the habit of minimization and blame shifting. They justify their behavior because things made them do that, rather than seeing themselves as instruments that do it themselves, that they made a choice. That's what you see in the the show Adolescence. The show Adolescence, really, this boy kept claiming he was innocent. I didn't do this horrible thing. I'm innocent. And yet they had clear evidence. It couldn't have gotten clearer that it was him that did it. Why did he then kept professing his innocence? Because he's been allowed to say, because he put it out of his mind, and because it was justified in his opinion, it was justified. And it then ceased to be over. And because he didn't value other people, as individuals of their own right. You see that everywhere. All of his peers and students at the school did the same thing. They didn't recognize other people outside of themselves. And as a result, then that other person's pain and loss didn't matter. Also, men are isolated, and because of their isolation, they have a tremendous emotional dependence on women. And that makes them very vulnerable in relationships. So everything gets stacked onto this relationship with a woman, and he needs her. I saw that really clearly with my dad. Whenever my mom was out of town, he would literally go to the living room, turn off the lights, and sink into a depression until she came home. And interestingly enough, this is a guy who was he was so creative when it came to repairing equipment on the farm that he didn't even need to usually take it out to a shop to fix it. He could just figure stuff out. He was really clearly gifted in a lot of ways, a fantastic problem solver. And yet, when it came to his emotional well-being and the sense of his stability in life, he placed it completely in the role of my mom. And if she wasn't around, then he couldn't hold himself up. So you can see, if he had been a little more angrier man, a little more domineering man, that would have made a terrible, dangerous situation for my mom, because anything that would have threatened their connection, threatened potentially a loss of his dependency on him, then he would have resulted in violence. And I think a lot of men do that. I think when they feel like they're losing control, they then become more violent. And unfortunately, because there's a lack of accountability and impunity, and we let men get away with stuff, and it's mind-boggling how we do it. Can you imagine for a second? Let's just flip the tables for a second. Imagine if, when there's a essay and a situation of physical violence, intimate sexual violence or intimate physical violence towards a woman, instead of asking the woman where she was and what she was wearing, imagine we asked the man what he was doing and what went through his mind and why he thought he should be allowed to do that. Imagine the scrutiny. If we put the same kind of scrutiny we put on men for their behavior that we put on women for being a victim, how things would be different in that arena. But because we don't, and we've all seen the statistics of the number of rapists who get away without any impunity every year is huge. I think there's like, one time they did a classroom, an auditorium people, and asked how many people stand up who've ever been essayed. And then they asked everybody who's to sit down, who's actually got some form of justice. And mostly the whole room's continued to stay standing. I know every person who's ever did any form of sexual abuse against me has not had any kind of consequences. They have been able to walk away with impunity, without any kind of consequence. So because of that, then it gives the implicit message that it's okay, that it really doesn't matter, because there's no consequences to it, because their hands are not slapped for that. So I think the other reason that men abuse, and this is something that kind of I've been thinking about as I get ready for this, is that men abuse because they don't know what to do with their emotions, because they've not been taught how to deal with the emotions, and they tend to sublimate them into two massive directions. This is what I saw in my office a lot when I was counseling people as a psychologist. Men tend to sublimate it into the direction of hunger, sleep, sex, or in dominance, in anger. So they tend to move into anger, they tended to move it into sexual affection, or they tended to move it into one of their kind of normal habits that would meet their needs. They didn't see the emotional pain. They didn't know what to do with shame, and they often didn't even feel shame. They didn't really know what to do with sadness or grief. They didn't really know what to do when they felt lost or bored or this restlessness. There was a lot of emotions that they just didn't know how to handle. And as a result, they tend to move into one of these realms as a way to express it. And one of the pieces of work that I did with them in the office when I was counseling was to ask them to slow down and try to start identifying emotions so they could begin to do something different, because you have to know what you feel in order for you to do something different with the way you feel. And I think men are abusive because they can, because they're powerful, because they have the strength, because they've been given the authority, and it just makes sense for them to use dominance and control as the vehicle to manifest this for them. So let's now shift the gears and get into why women abuse. And I hope you are holding your questions, because I really would love to talk more about what you think about all of this as we're talking about this. And for those of you who have never come across my page or my channel before, I'm Dr. Kerry McAvoy. I'm a retired psychologist. I have over 20 years of counseling experience where I had a general private practice. I also worked at the psychiatric facility as well as outpatient. So I saw in residential treatment with children. So I kind of saw a wide range of the population in various conditions. So I'm so excited that you're joining me today, because I go live every Tuesday at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time. And next week, we're going to be talking about going no contact. If you should, what should you be thinking about? What are the ramifications of going no contact? When you shouldn't go no contact? What happens when you don't go no contact and you should? How do you stay sane in that, as well as when you go no contact, what do you do with all the pain and the grief, as well as just the lack of understanding that you get from culture? So I hope you'll join me next Tuesday when we talk about that. Unfortunately, for those of you who got the newsletter, you may have thought I'm talking about it today. That was actually an error. I didn't send out a new message about it, because I just thought, well, I've advertised it several spots what this topic's going to be about this week. But if you've joined hoping that we're going to be talking about no contact. Please come back next week because we'll get into it then. All right, why do women abuse? And as I'm going to say again, I said this at the top, I do not believe women are the victim of society and abuse only because they are oppressed. I do not believe that. Yes, some women do abuse because they've been oppressed. Absolutely. It's reactive. They don't know what else to do. They have no choice. And that may be you. That maybe you've been in one of those experiences where you didn't know how to get out. This was the only way you could see to get out. And you became abusive as a way to sort of regain power and to keep yourself safe. But that's not every woman. There's also women who are just not good. They're just toxic people. They're narcissistic or they're sociopathic, and they abuse because they can, just like men abuse because they can. So let's talk about why women abuse and how it's different from men, because it is different. So men have power. Women, by nature, being a woman in the society, does not innately have power, but rather we have other benefits. We have other advantages. One is our sexual charm, as well as our relationship savvy. We're better at maneuvering relationships than men are because we have a lot more experience and because we're just wired to be more aware of it. But also we have the advantage, in fact, that we have, men want sex, but we tend to be the keeper of sex. So just that in itself, I know men feel that's abusive for women to say no. Well, it's our body. It is our choice. But some of us use that as a way to manipulate and control. And I absolutely know that women do that. Absolutely. I've actually sat in therapy appointment listening to a couple go at it. And the things this woman said to her partner, I thought was horrifying. Absolutely, like she shredded his masculinity. There was no reason for it. She wasn't losing the argument in the room. She just did it because she could. So I know there are women like that out there. Absolutely. I know that maybe you're a man and you've experienced this personally, where your partner has just destroyed you by withholding, by teasing, by taunting, by then even maybe playing up the relationship with other people. I know that. I know this happens. So let's look at why women abuse and how it's different from men. Okay, so women tend to use more social and emotional manipulation over physical dominance, as I just said that. So they're better at guilt tripping, emotional blackmail, passive aggressiveness, instead of using just outright fear and intimidation. They're more likely to withhold affection. Now, I'm not saying men don't do this, because men do. I was in a relationship with my ex who used stonewalling all the time. It was his favorite mechanism, was to just withhold contact with me, to sort of chill me out and starve me from contact with him. But women are more guilty of withholding affection, using silent treatment, being publicly humiliating as control mechanisms. Women are also more likely, this is number 2, to use victimhood as a way to justify abuse. They'll abuse their abuser by accentuating their vulnerability and positioning themselves as the victim while they're being the aggressor, which makes it really hard for the one being victimized, who's now being called out as the aggressor, to recognize that they're actually the first person being abused. So how does that happen? So this is an example. So, and this, by the way, happens with women to women and women to men, and then men can do this to women too, but watch out for this dynamic. So you bring up an issue to somebody that matters to you, and they then are crushed by the fact that you did that, and that the way you did it and the words that you did it, they want to argue that you're not accurate and that you shouldn't have used that word, and that was so harmful to them, and that do you not understand how that in fact impacted them? And notice what happened. The tables were turned. Your original problem has now got lost, and now you're defending yourself for bringing up the problem, because now you've been cast as the perpetrator when you were actually the victim who was asking for something to get resolved. So watch out for this very sophisticated strategy. It's called DARVO, which is defend and attack and reverse victim. It's called deny, because there's a denial. I didn't hurt you. There's an attack on you for bringing the issue up, and then the person resumes the position of the victim and accuses you of being the offender. So that's DARVO. So women are very good at that. Now men, I'm not saying men aren't good, and they can be very good at this too, but women are very good at that. Women are better at psychological and verbal abuse techniques. They're but a little bit better at character assassinations, at sort of using, think of the mean girl, on the playground. They're a little bit better at using the group against people, triangulating. Men tend to rely on overt threats, and women tend to rely more on emotional dependencies and connectedness as a way to trap victims. Number 4, women are better at using social structures and institutions. They are more likely to exploit gender biases in family court. Now, again, there is real gender biases in court. Please don't come at me saying I don't get it, because I do get it. But I'm calling out the few women who do this manipulatively, harmfully, that ruin it for all women. That, and this is the thing. I know I'm already having a debate in my own head. There are a lot of men who do a lot of bad things in court, a lot of very bad things in court. And, we're not good at calling them out about it. We're not. But when women do something bad in court, oh my goodness, it becomes sort of a stereotype. It becomes a mean, and every woman's guilty of it. And then we sort of start to exploit that. I'm not saying that, but I am saying there are some women who do this and do this well. So we can't say it never happens, because it does happen. But on the other hand, is it happening all the time? Absolutely not. Are you personally guilty of doing that? No, I'm not saying that you're guilty of doing that. I'm just saying there are women who are very good at doing this. So we need to, that's the sad part, is that because women come under attack so frequently for everything. In fact, I did a video about Chuck Derry and how he said why men abuse, and a man got on my video and said, how come you're not talking about all the time that women abuse men? And I had to come back to him and said, by the way, I'm doing this live. We will be covering this. And by the way, did you also know that 80% of that, when you look at all the reasons for unaliving somebody, all the rates of homicide in the world, or I'm sorry, in the United States, do you realize that 82% of them, because I went and looked it up, 82% of them are perpetrated by men, not women, by men, men against men, men against women. So I I know that we really get uncomfortable because women come under such intense scrutiny for every slight error that we make. But we also, though, have to see women as abusers, because sometimes they are. Sometimes they are. Women are also really good at using their maternal power and parentification in abusing children. They'll often use their children for guilting and guilt tripping, overprotection, and enmeshment. And you want to hear a great example of that? Check out this week's podcast, Breaking Free from Narcissistic Abuse, where I interview Alex Anderson, who did the movie Fog. It stands for Fear, Obligation, and Guilt. It's about a mother-daughter dynamic that is highly toxic. Fascinating discussion with this filmmaker he's a man who got into this and really looked at a mother-daughter relationship and just how guilt was used, how there's this weird enmeshment that happens. Some women even engage in forms of emotional incest. I don't know if you've ever heard of that before, where they'll make their child responsible for taking care of their emotional needs by over disclosing information that is way beyond the kid's wherewithal and emotional ability to handle it. They're being put in a position of a parent or a co-parent with their mother, which is just a terrible thing to do to a child. And the last reason women abuse is because they like to do social sabotage, and they're very good at spreading rumors and gossiping and being divisive, and they can create all sorts of chaos between friends and family. I watched this with my grandmother, and she'd have people come in. She was abusive, by the way. My grandmother was not abusive because she was abused. Was she abused? I'm sure she was, because she got into some relationship with very nasty men who were abusive men. But my grandmother abused whether she was in the relationship with a man or not in a relationship with a man. My grandmother was just an abusive person. And what she would do is she'd bring people into her life, these women who were often needy, kind of down and out, didn't have a place to stay. Maybe they were being abused themselves and really needed rescuing. And then she would start to do this kind of coercive control where could say over their life, and she'd start to criticize them. She'd talk about them behind their back and analyze how they raised the kids. And of course, she always knew she was superior. She knew better. And she would just start to poison the relationship over time around this person until eventually there was no option, but the person would have to leave because they'd been so divisive and so nasty that for their own safety, they had to cut ties with her, often blocking her because she was so deadly. So yes, women can be really, really good at social sabotage. Refining Life Coach Crystal, you just asked me what was the name again? Which name was it? The movie I just mentioned with Alex Anderson called Fog, Fog, or are you asking about Chuck Derry's study that I talked about last? Okay, it's Fog. So if you go to the podcast, Breaking Free from Narcissistic Abuse, I put the trailer as well as the full-length the movie. You can watch it for free. It's on Tubi, and it's on Netflix. I'm sorry, it's not on Netflix. It's on Tubi, and it's on YouTube. So the YouTube link is in my show notes on Breaking Free from Narcissistic Abuse. Extremely well done movie. Extremely well done. Painful. He had me sobbing. The trailer had me sobbing. And the trailer starts out with how the movie starts out. So that, wow. We're going to talk about that next week. Going no contact. And mothers as well as fathers, parents as well as other people. We're going to talk about no contact. Okay. So those are the reasons why men and women abuse. Let's talk about why abusers don't recognize the problem. Why can't they see what they do? Have you ever noticed that they just don't see it? Well, it's because of their very deep-seated psychological defenses and social conditioning and cognitive distortions. They don't see themselves as abusive. Back to that show or that limited series on Netflix where adolescence, that kid, all the way through it to the very end, maintained his innocence while we had videotape of him, doing what he did, doing the crime. How could he say that? He watched the tape. He actually watched the tape and then looked at his dad and said, I didn't do it. I didn't do it. I'm innocent. How could he do that? Well, because of these incredible psychological defenses, because of their cognitive distortions. I actually think at times abusers border on what I would say legitimately as a psychologist is delusional. They're mildly delusional at times. Now, are they psychotic? No, they're not psychotic. They still have reality testing for the most part. But when it comes to around themselves, their ability to sort of change the narrative to justify injustifiable behavior, I don't know if that's an actual word, but it's incredible. It's incredible. So here's some reasons why they don't see it. Because the cognitive distortion that they say to themselves is, I'm not the problem. They literally reframe their actions in a way that justifies their behavior by minimization, which says, it's not that bad. I didn't hurt you that bad. It didn't hurt that much. Blame shifting, which you made me do it. If you'd not done that, I would not have done that. Deflection, what about all the things you've done to me? Or moral justification, which I just did it because I want you to be better, because I was trying to love you and help you. I remember I had somebody call me up and let me have it for an hour. It was a woman, by the way. A woman who was abusing me. Let me have it for an hour. And the reason she gave and why she let me have it for an hour was other people were talking behind my back and she wanted to save me from the pain of being called out. So that she took the moral justification of, I did it because I care about you and I want to help you. So that really helps them maintain the self-image of, I'm not abusive, even though it's clear from their behavior that they are. The second reason is a lack of empathy, and they're just emotionally blind to what they're doing. They struggle, and this is something I've talked a lot about, so if you've been around me a little bit, you've heard this before. They don't have a connectedness with you. They don't see other people as people. Like, think about what that means. And I have a feeling if we were to rate everyone on your ability to respect other people, like to really recognize the individuality of another person, nobody's 100%. I just want to say to you, you're not 100%. There's some area in you that you're blind, where your needs and your desires and your issues, your pain trumps other people. And in that place, you step on people's toes and harm them. Now, I hope it's less than 50% where you struggle that. But the closer you get to zero, and God forbid we meet somebody with zero, I hope we don't, because that is an awful person, the more likely you are to step on other people, use them as consumables, and truly not register them any more significant than, I see this cup. This cup to me is something I use. I do not recognize that it has feelings. I don't care about how I treat it, except that how it cost me and the fact I don't want to replace it. But it is nothing more than an inanimate object for my benefit. And unfortunately, people who lack empathy and lack the ability to recognize other people see people as just for their benefit. And as a result, they are not aware of the way they impact you. They don't care about your feelings about this. They just care about the fact that they don't want you inconveniencing them with your feelings because it doesn't matter to them. They don't want you inconveniencing them by making them in any way lose anything that matters to them. So they truly do not see you as a person. You are nothing more than just this cup that you're using. And in fact, if I decided I didn't like this cup, I could go out and, do whatever I want to it. And it would affect me in no way at all. And that's how they feel about you. It has no effect on them what they do to you, which is why when we spend all this time looking for recognition and closure and acknowledgement, we're never going to get it because they don't recognize our feelings. We aren't a person to them. Number 3, they have a deep need for power and control. Abuse is not just about trying not to lose power. We focus a lot on that, but it's also about the maintenance of power. So whenever you question them, or you set a boundary, or you resist something that's important to them, they see that as defiance, and they need to protect themselves against your action. Let me say that again, because I think that's a lot of us don't understand that. Again, remember, they don't have any feelings about you. You're not a person. You're no more than an inanimate object. But when you set a boundary or question them or resist in some way, that's an act of defiance that actually is an attack to them. They see that as a personal attack that they then have to protect themselves from the loss of the control that they have over you and over their life and over their environment. So it's not even just about you see what I'm saying? It's not about gaining control. It's about maintaining control. And because of this, just don't see their behavior as problematic because to them, it's self-protective. Again, I'm going back to that show of Netflix Adolescence because if you haven't watched it or if you have watched it, think about this. That teenager's insistence on his innocence and his blankness about the other person. He never mentions the victim, not once. It's as if the victim never, in his mind, exists. He saw her personal attack on him as he needed to do something to protect himself from her. And it was just about him making it right. In his mind, it was him making it right. It wasn't about the cost to her. It was simply self-protection. And that's why he had no feelings about it. To him, it wasn't a problem. He did what anybody would do, is if you step on my toe, I'm going to shove you off my toe to protect myself. What he failed to see is he shoved that person off the toe with a lethal weapon, not just, hey, with his words, please stop doing this to me. He didn't do it the right way. He did it in a massive way. But because of that, they just don't see this as problematic. All right, reason number 4, because of social reinforcement and cultural blind spots. Here's how society reinforces male entitlement. They encourage men to see control as natural and women's resistance as unreasonable. And right now we see a massive pushback right now around all of that. And even what's happening in the United States is a big pushback to that women are losing rights everywhere because of that. And it's just seen as, they say, well, we want to go back to the 1950s. 1950s was not a good time. I mean, I was born in 1962. I can tell you, growing up and watching women through the 1962 and 1960s, it sucked. There's nothing benefit. Women couldn't even hold a checking account or buy property, so there was nothing good about that. But men see this as, they are entitled. They're the protectors, which protect from what? I don't know. I've never been, all the men in my life did not protect me from the other men in my life. So I've not been protected very much. But anyway, it's reinforced that this is the way things should be. For women are reinforced around our victimhood. We're seen as it's okay to do controlling behavior as long as it's self-defensive because it's what we have to do. It's okay to lean into our weakness and to be manipulative by being underhanded and passive aggressiveness. In abusive LGBTQ plus relationships, it's because it's just harder to recognize that men can be cruel to men and women can be cruel to women. We somehow think because they're the same sex and should get each other, that abuse shouldn't happen in those relationships. But it does happen because there are people who are abusive in both sexes who will harm anybody they're in a relationship with. Unfortunately, society really likes power and dominance. We champion confidence. We champion people who are hardliners who just take things by control. We really don't support people for being soft and collaborative and compassionate and kind. That's just not really looked down or looked up on. Okay, reason number 5, because there's an inability to tolerate personal accountability. And anybody who's experienced abuse knows that. Accountability requires emotional maturity. You have to learn to sit with the discomfort, sit with your shame. I'm sorry, let me say that again. Sit with your shame, recognize that you've harmed somebody else, not be undone by the pain of that, and then begin to think proactively about what you're going to do differently in the future so that that doesn't happen again. It takes empathy, self-reflection, and determination, as well as self-control. I just listed 4 things a lot of toxic people don't have. They don't have empathy, they're not self-reflective, they don't have good impulse control, and they're not self-controlled. So they do what they want to do when they want to do it. They do it because it feels the right thing to do. And then they do it because they don't recognize the impact of anybody else. And they cannot tolerate any emotional pain. They're busy, compartmentalizing, projecting, denying, splitting. They're doing all these things to avoid the pain. And because of that, they don't have a tolerance for difficult emotions, and they don't learn how to deal proactively with things that go wrong. They don't know how to face their own failures and face their own insecurities. And instead, what they do is they double down, attack, and rewrite history in order to maintain an interior psychological stability. And some people have grown up with the idea that might makes right, and that it's okay to do that. Why do victims fail to recognize the abuse? And maybe this is what's happening in your end. Maybe you're failing to recognize the abuse. And here's some reasons why we struggle to see it. Because abuse doesn't start at the beginning of the relationship. We meet somebody who presents exactly the way we want them to, and they're doing this on purpose. They have shifted themselves like a chameleon to match you so that you think you matched a fantastic person. And they present wonderful in the beginning. It's probably the best experience you've ever had in your life, because that's not real life, unfortunately. And slowly over time, the abuse is introduced, and the shifts are really subtle. It's a subtle boundary cross here and there. It's a comment that was made initially critically in order for your best interest, and they're really done it so-called to help you, before it turns into something nasty and just backhanded jabs. In the beginning, it's polite, kind, done for your well-being, and then it shifts slowly into something way uglier. The other reason is because abusive people are using gaslighting incredibly often. And so it causes victims to doubt their own perception, to end up kind of not even knowing what's real, for them to end up thinking that they're too much, that somehow this is a reflection of their failures. They often are told that things never happen that way, that they're too sensitive, and that if they as a victim really love the person, they would be more supportive. And all of this is either denial, minimization, invalidation, or manipulation. And over time, unfortunately, this is the scary part, victims stop trusting their own instincts and start rationalizing the abuse instead of identifying it. I haven't even mentioned number 3, which is the trauma bond and emotional dependency. And anybody who's been trauma bonded knows that is horrible. It's a mesmerizing dependency that you have with another person, where you are psychologically almost addicted to this person based upon this intermittent pattern of reinforcement of incredible attachment with the threat of abandonment. And because of that roller coaster of hot and cold, you become cemented to them. They've actually done studies. I think it's like hundreds of times more addicting, more attaching than a normal connection. You become connected, like dependently connected to this person. Think of Patty Hearst, if you guys can remember her, if you're old enough to know that. There are other examples of people who've been kidnapped and end up staying with their abusers even when there was clear opportunities to leave. Why? Because of things like the Stockholm Syndrome, and trauma bond is a form of a Stockholm Syndrome. It's a betrayal bond. It's a trauma bond. Number 4, pre-existing beliefs about love and relationship. Because we've been grown up and we've seen this in patterns of our family and patterns of other people around us and on social media and on TV, we think it's normal. We think this is just what relationships look like. And that there's always, I used to think, there's no good relationship. It's always filled with control, guilt, and emotional neglect. Not realizing that that's actually because I'd been habituated to expect guilt, control, and emotional neglect. And we hear messages like, well, love is hard. And it always, it always takes two. Every problem, it always takes two to tango, and all relationships are difficult. No, they're not. Abusive relationships are difficult. Normal relationships are not. And we end up internalizing gender roles to think, well, that's just the way women behave. And that's just the way men behave, not realizing, no, that's a toxic way to behave, whether you're male or female. And victims, number 5, become self-blaming, and they internalize the guilt. They think, if I was better, if I was different, if I was stronger, if I was more resilient, then this wouldn't happen. If I hadn't acted this way, I wouldn't have made them mad. I just need to try harder, which is why we throw one thing after another, trying to fix the relationship, instead of realizing that the other person's doing this to keep us under their control, and that nothing's ever going to change, and that we're not going to fix the situation. They just give us enough hope to think that it's a little bit better so that we don't leave, but then it always reverts back to the way that it was. Number 6, because we're afraid admitting the truth, the consequences. We are afraid of admitting the truth. I know this was very much the case for me, that if I had to admit that I was in a very bad relationship, that this was never going to be better, that meant I would be back out on my own. I would be back living alone. I would be back with not knowing what to do with myself, completely lost after being widowed from my first relationship. And I really didn't want that. And it's almost like a sunk cost fallacy. We end up thinking, I've put so much effort and so much work, maybe I just stick it out a little bit longer, things will get better. Because we're afraid of being lonely, we're afraid of the financial stability, we're afraid of what our friends are going to think, and most importantly, we're afraid of what the abuser is going to do if we do this. And we're also afraid of losing the dream that we thought we had. And so we unfortunately then just kind of pick the reality we know over avoiding the unknown reality that we don't know. And number 7, the final reasons why victims don't see the abuse is because we're given just enough hope for change that we believe that change is possible, that our belief in change is weaponized against us, and that we're told by our abusers if we just did the right thing. Like if you just had the meal on the table when they came home after that long day, then they wouldn't be in a bad mood. No, I'm sorry, they were in a bad mood because they could be in a bad mood. Or we're told that, if we show up and we're more intimately involved with our partner, then they would be a better mood and then this never would have happened. No, they're dysregulated and they're using that intimacy as a way to regulate themselves. And it actually had nothing to do with you. They're just utilizing you. They're using you. But because of this illusion of control, we end up feeling like maybe it might change. I don't know how many times, and I thought this myself many times. What if I leave? And suddenly this person becomes for the better, for the good. And I've already closed the door and they're never going to take me back because I've rejected them. And I miss out on all the good. I want to tell you that's not happening. That's not happening. That this is all a manipulation. The good time is the manipulation. It isn't going to get better. They're going to be exactly the same way with the next person as they are with you. All right, I just threw a whole lot at you, so let's see what you guys are saying, because I have not actually been looking at the comments at all, hardly. Well, I watched you TikTok just slightly, but not much. So yeah, what are you thinking about this? I see we got a lot of people right now on YouTube. Thank you so much for being here and hanging out with me today. If you guys don't know me, I'm Dr. Kerry McAvoy. I'm a retired psychologist. Yes, retarded dwarf, that is a great name. I love that. How can you abandon what never was? Yeah, that's a great question. I like that you asked that. You're right. And Lisa, it's like a slot machine for sure. It is like a slot machine. So GMB, thank you so much for being a subscriber to my channel. And by the way, I don't know if you guys know, if you subscribe at the highest level, you get access to all the exclusive podcast extra interviews, all of them, with Chuck Derry, with Dr. Lester. You get to hear Dr. Peter Salerno. I think there might be 2 of them with him. There may or may not be, there is one with Dr. Nadine Macaluso, as well as I think maybe with Dr. Robin Stern. We're adding to them every week. There's a new one that joins the list every week. So when you become a subscriber on YouTube at the higher level, you get access to that. So GMB, thank you so much for being a subscriber. So you said definitely, Dr. Kerry, which is my issue, which is why I had not left. But I'm getting there as it's not good for my health, mind, or spirit. I'm glad to hear that. It takes so much effort to get to the place of being ready to leave, for sure. It really does. I didn't want to abandon her like everybody else did, not realizing she was the one that pushed everybody away. They didn't abandon her. That's right, Lisa. And thank you for pointing that out. They're so good at finding the kernel of truth that we can see, which makes us feel so compelled by that truth, that they have this potential. You know, we fall in love with their potential. And as a result of that, then we get afraid of leaving because we think they're redeemable. We think that the change is possible, not realizing that that actually is just another deflection mechanism. It's just another uh, effort to manipulate you and exploit you. I'm going backwards, by the way. I don't know if you've noticed that, because you guys, I'm looking for new comments. And yeah, so please ask me what you're thinking. Yeah, yeah. So Cussler right now says he'd stopped drinking for 7 months, and I thought that was evidence of change. But now I'm seeing that it really isn't change at all. That happened to me as well. Mine actually read self-help books. He went to therapy. He'd even actually highlight sections of the self-help book and discuss them with me. And you'd think that looks like change, right? This is somebody who's really taken his problems seriously and he's looking to get better. But what I didn't know was it was all a ruse. It was just a way to get me off his back so that there would be no talk or threats of me leaving. It wasn't actually real authentic change. Because here's the thing, this is what we're missing. Think about what you would do if you were called out for doing something extraordinarily harmful to other people. You would be broken. It would psychologically destroy you. You would like hardly know how to like lift your head and meet the public again. And then you would be so careful that anything that you did have even a remote look, you know, smack of what you did before, you'd be like, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to trigger you. Are you okay? You'd be all this checking in, right? You'd be doing all this work and effort. Has this person done that? No, they kind of act like, get off my back. You're bugging me. You know, why are you on me? Are you still being, can you just let this go? I mean, we get all that kind of stuff. So that's not real accountability. That's defensiveness. Where we often mistake just superficial, low bar change as effort when it's just defensiveness and a person not wanting to lose their way of life. It's not real change. We need to get better at identifying authentic change and not be uncomfortable with holding people to a high standard of what change should look like, which it should be an existential crisis. If you are a person who does real harm to other people, you should be in crisis over your behavior. You should have a dark night of the soul and feel, yeah, exactly, Jennifer, be filled with regret and deep remorse. There should be a turning of your behavior and never wanting to be like that again. What we see is just cursory, kind of like a nod in that direction and think, oh, they're changing. No, what we're really seeing is our fear of losing the connection. We're not really like, there's not authentic change. It's just us, our fear of losing the connection. So yeah, we need to really stop. And yeah, they call us controlling, but we need to quit being controlled by their negative thoughts of us. Okay, so they don't like it. So they call us bad names. All right, who cares, right? Does it change you essentially? Do you need their approval for you to be a good person? Aren't you a good person in yourself? So we need to stop like letting their tactics of intimidation and fear have so much control over us. And that's a way for us to find real freedom. So Dr. Peterson shared how to handle people like this. We change and they panic. I love that. Yeah, that actually comes out of family systems theory. So family systems theory, and it was Minuchin. Salvador Minuchin was one of the critical key people who did the big theoretical understanding of family systems, said that every group of people is like an organism. So it's not just you're an organism, but when you're part of a larger group, that group creates an organism as well. And it has rules, it functions, that keeps it stable, just like your body has rules that function, that keeps it stable. So the way to change this organism of this group of people is to actually, you change and you change the organism. You make it change by you being different. So often in therapy, with family system therapy, the therapist would help one member do something radically different to throw the organism into a new position so that something new happens. So yeah, I agree. Dr. Jordan's right about that. Yeah, I agree. Restarted Dwarf says the only thing that changes with these people is their tactics. The only thing they're ever sorry for is sorry for getting called out. I agree. Unfortunately, that is often the truth, is that just sorry for getting called out. So I saw that Marissa, that after months, he does this again, I'm not going, or I'm not going or interested, I'm divorcing you. Yeah, I think that's if you want to do the most compassionate thing, a really great technique to do is to have a list of things that you want different. Don't tell them all of them. Just tell them a one or two. Keep the rest of them to yourself. But make them reasonable. Like talk to somebody that you respect. Maybe a coach, maybe a therapist, maybe some trusted friend, somebody that you really know has a very balanced way of seeing things and making sure it's fair and this is a legitimate thing to want in a relationship. Then set a time for yourself. Make it 3 months, 6 months. It's got to be some time. It can't be a week or two. You got to let this sit for a minute. Say to this person, listen, if things don't, no, I'm not telling you to do this with a dangerous person who cannot take in, because they're going to view this. Remember what I said about maintenance of control? We need to really remember that. Maintenance of control. A loss of control is like a threat. It's a sense of threat to people who are highly toxic. So please always consider your risk factor. But if you feel you're safe enough, you can say to somebody who says, I'm trying, and you say, I have a list of things that need to be different. And these are a few things that need to be changed. And I'm going to not talk about all of them, but they're things that should be in every healthy relationship. And I'm going to revisit this in a few months and see if things are any better. The reason you don't want to give them the whole playbook is because they'll do the whole playbook. It won't be an adequate test because they'll just give you exactly what they want for as long as it takes to get you to stop being preoccupied with it. And the minute that you stop being aware and you let go of it, it goes back to normal. So unfortunately, that's why you can't just do this. Tell them, I want this, this, and this, and this different. You can't tell them that because they'll do exactly that. And then nothing more would change. But a person who's really reflective on change, who's invested in changing, will look at all of their life and get their act together. And often when one thing changes, other things change too, just by nature of it. That's what real change looks like. Things get better. But yeah, but set a time zone. So I'm back to that commenter. I love the fact that you're doing it. Set a time with yourself. Put the question on whether or not the relationship's going to make it on a shelf. And then when that timer expires, revisit. Has those items changed? Now here's the hard part. You have to be ready, really ready with yourself to actually pull the trigger. If nothing has changed, then you need to be prepared to leave. Please don't do this unless you're willing to follow through. And only set the goals you can actually really do. That's the other problem we have, is we often set goals that we ourselves are not ready to make or take. Don't do that, because if you do that and ever say that out loud, you have weakened your position. That person now knows that you are not honest with yourself and that you can't do hard things. So don't threaten, and I really actually don't want you to threaten ever, but don't ever set a boundary that you're not prepared to follow all the way through with. You got to be prepared to do that. Sherry, we have to find, so Sherry's question is, when will people get, I'm going to make this for both men and women, when will people get justice? People lie and they get away with it. And her partner told everybody who would listen that she was swinging at him, and when in reality, all that she was doing was yelling. And he lies and he gets away with it. Now, what you're experiencing, Sherry, is common, and it's what we call rewriting the story or rewriting the narrative. Yeah, justice is not going to happen. And I just was listening to another commenter about this, talking about abuse and violence and domestic violence, saying that if we hold out for social justice or for justice, we often get stuck and it slows our own healing down. You have to think about it in a different way, like how to take your own control back, how to make your life quality. Because I really believe your greatest revenge is to have a good life, to show this person that you don't need them and that they aren't important to them, because they want to center themselves as the critical person in the universe. And when you decenter them, you've essentially said that they're not. And what more powerful statement can you make? What more power can you have than doing that? So I really don't make justice my focus. It used to be, but it isn't anymore. I really these days focus more on living my best life. Join me. I hope you're following me, and I really, really appreciated that. Oh, it's interested. Oh, yeah, you're right. I said it wrong. Okay, so your name has to do with a dwarf, a star. It's a new star forming. And unfortunately, because I often will read things wrong, but it means less. It means it's not a, it's a retarded star, a retarded, not the other word. And it's a new star that's forming. I appreciate you explaining that to me. Thank you so much. Yeah, the autism and narcissism, we're going to do that in 2 weeks. So next week is about going no contact. And then the week after that will be about autism and narcissism. So also the podcast, I don't know if you know it, the podcast is 1 week ahead. So right now, this week is on mother-daughter dynamics and going no contact with mom. So please check out Breaking Free from Narcissistic Abuse. And then the week after that, next week's podcast is on narcissism and autism. But the live is a week behind. So I always do a week behind. All right, you guys, I'm going to wrap it up. I'm going to go over and join my Toxic Free Relationship Club, which we now meet 4 times a week, as well as we also have a recentering sessions on Thursday where we're practicing meditations and self-soothing and grounding. We're also going to do journal prompts. We're going to get into some yoga nidra. So if you're very dysregulated and you want help getting regulation, or you're just really needing help with custody stuff, because Lisa's offering a free training. Lisa Sunny is offering a free training on, I think this next week for Toxic Free Club members. So a lot happening in this group. How you join is send me a link. Send me a question about it at hello@KerryMcAvoyPhD, or you can message me here. I read all my messages on TikTok. But hello@KerryMcAvoyPhD. By the way, I always offer financial assistance to anyone who asks. So for some reason you can't afford the membership, please do not join. Please don't. Reach out to me. Ask me. The podcast, Coco, is Breaking Free from Narcissistic Abuse. It's wherever you listen to podcasts. It's on iHeart, Spotify, Apple, Breaking Free from Narcissistic Abuse. All right, you guys, this was amazing. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I will see you back here Tuesday at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time. Bye-bye.